Hello and welcome to What's Your College Story with Elikonas. I'm Katie Stroud, your host, and today we are talking with Karen Hyder. Karen Hyder has had a very interesting college life. So she has done the full college experience even before getting to college, and she's done some incredible things. I know a little bit about her story, and I'm excited to bring this to you today. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Karen. Give us an introduction of who you are and what you would like people to know about you.
Yeah, it's so nice to be with you, Katie. Thank you for inviting me to do this. I guess I can start at home in Buffalo, New York. Go Bills. I was raised in a conservative family and went to school mostly taught by nuns. And they were, shout out to the Mercy nuns, they were very good at teaching the chronically unwilling. They allowed me to complete my education to the point where I was ready for college entrance when I finished my high school program. And that was a good setup because college was certainly a big transition. And in some cases, I'm not sure I would have made it if I wasn't being really urged from multiple directions.
Well, so you said the unwilling, chronically unwilling, is that the word you used?
Yeah, that was me. I was not a brilliant student. I was a kid that was more interested in, I like to organize things. I like to plan events and parties. I like to play in the woods. I always had my nose in a book. I even skipped school one time to finish a Stephen King novel. So I wasn't really all that keen on school, but I ended up, strangely enough, working as a trainer, and I still am a trainer.
Okay, so you feel like you were not a great student, but from the experience that I've heard, you are in fact a great learner. I mean, simply being interested in books is a big deal. You learn a lot from that. And I think you have more to share on that. So you started out in Buffalo, you went to a Catholic school, you were raised
Hmm.
by the Sisters of Mercy.
Hmm.
So they in a sense prepared you for going to a bigger like been to college. And you mentioned that that was a transition.
Yeah.
What was it that was different?
Well, I got to go to school about 100 miles from home, so it was sort of safe, and it had been a school that two of my siblings had attended prior to that. And my brother was still in the same city. So I was going away from home, but not really too far away from home. And I was starting out in a psychology program because I was interested in psychology, but I ended up not really liking the program, and literature was more compelling, which to me is also psychology. So I worked through a literature and a writing program instead of psychology. And along the way, I ended up taking some courses related to like technical writing, and we had to submit our papers through this newfangled thing, Word Perfect for DOS. Maybe you remember Reveal Codes. It was orange,
Yes.
nasty, nasty business. But
Yes.
that's where we were with technology when I was college age.
That was pretty high tech at the time, I assume. I mean, I do remember those days, and it was exciting times. Not as exciting as what's going on today, but it certainly did get things started.
It's it. Yeah.
So, yeah, so tell us a little bit more about your early days of school and your transition to college and some of the things that that really stand out for you in those, like your origin story, so to speak.
I want to point out that I realize that saying I went to private school, and I think that gives people the idea that maybe the cash was flowing really readily through my life at all times, but it really wasn't. Once the tuition was paid, they didn't really want to hear from me. So I had 7 different jobs while I was in college. I did any jobs I could do on campus, like I worked in the food service and I worked in the writing center. So I was helping other students prepare for the test for competency in writing, which was required for all graduates. And people, by the time I met them, had already failed that test at least once. And they would come to me to help develop their papers that they were working on for any number of college courses that somebody might need a helper or an editor. So I worked one-on-one with students face to face as part of my just normal on-campus work. But that ended up leading to a job working for Berlitz as an English language teacher. And I was teaching typically men who were living in Rochester working for Kodak or Xerox or Bausch and Lomb. And I would meet them in the office and go through their program. And then I would meet their wives and children, typically at home at the dining room table, to teach them. So I became a kind of a face-to-face teacher just by the nature of what jobs were available to me on campus within my degree program. So I worked a lot in that realm and didn't always show up for class because I was busy, doing other things.
Other things like reading a book,
Definitely. Mm.
teaching people in their homes. That sounds like you learned a lot. What are some of the things that you gained from all that?
Well, those things, I mean, certainly teaching one-on-one, teaching adult learners was a wonderful experience for me. I wouldn't say I have the most patience with children. I do very well, though, with learners who are motivated to learn. So I take a
So
few
not
things
you.
from not me, right? I didn't use all the techniques that I learned when I was with the nuns, but I definitely practiced some of the techniques. I mean, they they have it down. But I also learned that there were methods to instructional design and to adult learning that were very effective, very compelling. And it was funny when I ended up in my after college job, I was a trainer. I taught people who were learning how to use things like Word for Windows and learning to click and double click for the first time. But when I went for the interview, they said, teach us something. Just, we want to know that you can teach. So I taught them the Berlitz method, which is essentially, this is a thing. What is this? And then you say, tell me,
This thing.
this is a
This
thing.
is the
Okay, good.
thing.
Right.
And
So
that's a
when I,
language learning
it
method.
is, it
Yeah.
is, yes. So my students at Berlitz were from Japan, from Germany. I had 6 Turkish police officers for 9 months. So I was very familiar with then what it took to compel adult learners to participate.
It sounds like
And
there's
when
a lot of cultural nuances in there that
so many things. They taught me so much. I think my mind was really blasted open at that point because like a down home girl, small town, Catholic school kind of thing. I didn't have a lot of exposure, certainly not to Turkish police officers. So it was fascinating to be in that space. And I loved it so much. And I felt really good about the work that I was doing because I could see progress. One woman said to me, Karine, when you first came to me, I didn't understand a word you said and I wanted to cry. And by the time we were having that conversation, we were just 2 women having a conversation. There wasn't the language obstacle as there had been in the beginning. So to watch somebody make that kind of progress is amazing. So I'm very focused on the event oriented stuff, things that somebody's going to learn something in this event, in this class.
hmm,
And I kept finding myself in those situations. So when I went for that job as a computer software trainer, they liked what I did with the Berlitz thing and all agreed that they wanted to hire me instantly. And I worked there for 9 years. So I ended up teaching people day in and day out how to use Word and PowerPoint and Harvard Graphics and Outlook and all the different tools. And so when I then got to the point where people were wanting to learn online, I certainly had a lot of exposure to just technology function in general and how to simplify that and teach that.
so so a lot of cultural interesting like language barrier stuff that you had to get through learning how to teach adults, which I imagine must be different from teaching children. You did say you worked with children, and and I don't know, just that exposure to people from another country. I went a trip to Japan when I was 14, and it was incredibly so eye-opening. Same
Mm,
thing, small
yeah,
town girl in
yeah.
another country. It was interesting.
Oh, well. you know that I did end up living in another country to be a trainer abroad. So,
Yes, yeah, I was actually going to get to that, but you mentioned that you had 7 jobs while you were going through college.
yeah.
And you mentioned like the tuition's paid, so you've got that covered. But your support system, you said they kind of like once the tuition's paid, they just left you to yourself. So
Yeah, I was the
get to
sixth child, and I was pretty self-sufficient. So just I kind of managed to deal with what I needed to deal with. But it was fine because it was motivating. It made me, I wanted to finish school because I wanted to not work in food service. I wanted to get beyond the cobbled together gig work that I was doing then, that I kind of ended up doing later in my career too, which was educational to learn how to be a gig worker
Mhm.
and accept that as being good, not just good enough, but hey, I'm making good money here, pulling in all these different projects that I'm interested in. And I was a little, as a student, I wasn't one to sit and focus on some random topics that somebody thought I should learn. I would be more likely to be out there doing the work. I was a handy person. I was a nanny. I waited tables, just whatever I needed to do. So it was that was good experiential stuff. But there was also plenty of stuff that ran in parallel to coursework, projects that I was working on campus itself. So that was also time consuming and instructive.
Right. So what were some of those projects that you worked on?
Yeah, well, one of them, I think the one that was probably most changed me the most was one of my friends who's a real extrovert and thought that I didn't have enough to do invited me to be part of a 24-hour dance marathon that we did on campus. The first year this marathon ran, my brother actually won it. So I don't know how you won it. We weren't winning it, we just did it.
Huh.
So my job was to get people to donate 1 hour of their time in our 24-hour window. And I said, donate. So I'm like getting a big band group, people from Arthur Murray Dance Studio. My friend Mike DeGiorgio got the guy from Foreigner, Lou Graham, to come. And he didn't sing
Wow.
for us, but he was there. And so we were able to pull in all these volunteers to participate in this thing in efforts to raise funds for Camp Good Days and special times. So our effort was called the Teddy Project. And it was all because of a young girl who lost her fight with cancer, who probably would have been our contemporary at our college had she lived to be old enough to go to college. She was from the community. And one of our professors wrote a book about her, which led to the development of the program, which led to the development of the dance marathon. And my little piece of it was so, it was important, but it was just one piece of a giant puzzle. But then in my later life, I ended up working in event production. And so I had to call people like you, Katie Stroud, and say, hey, can you come to our conference in, San Francisco or Las Vegas and speak for free for an hour? So
Right.
it was the same kind of work that I ended up doing later in life.
All right. So we lost a contemporary of ours, may she rest in peace. And as a result, it produced this project. You had to call people up to volunteer their time to dance or to present music or
Play music.
for did you say it was for 24 hours?
Yeah.
And it sounds like you had some really interesting people there, and all
Yeah.
of that experience led to event management
Yeah.
for bigger, for making money. And in the first place, right? You did it for a cause,
Yeah.
for earning money for other ill children that need, to have a little bit of fun between all their medical things. I understand that.
hmm
God bless you guys for doing that. Um, and then, but it really taught you a lot about event management, about getting in touch with people. evaluating proposals, many of which I have written, and yes, I have come and spoke at some of your conferences that you have played a role in organizing, right? Which have all been fantastic. And they're all things, in fact, another place where learning happens, right? We teach
Yeah.
people things about learning in general, given the nature of our conferences. Uh, but um, but all of that doesn't show up on your college, your what do they call it?
Transcripts.
Your
Yeah.
transcript, right?
No, it certainly didn't. No.
Uh,
Literature. Like what are you going to do with literature? How are you going to? It's like, well, I'm using the English language.
right, and that's a very good point, right? You get your degree in literature, people are trying to hire you. They're like, well, what can we do with this? And you learn something very interesting from literature. What was that?
Well, I feel like it was a degree in psychology. I mean, you learn about human nature, you learn about in a safe environment, you learn about the dynamics between people, love and hate, all the things. So that was all very fascinating to me. And the construct of the program was far more interesting than the construct of the psychology program.
I can only imagine. In fact, I happen to know that a lot of our AI has been trained using literature as well, for the same reason, right? To give AI a sense of humanity, psychology, how we behave and respond to behaviors. Um,
Even our idioms, just think of when I was teaching English. We had a class one time where we wanted the students to feel more confident speaking up, and they were students from all cultures, and they're living in America. So they need to learn how to like interrupt in the middle of a conversation, which they wouldn't do in Japan. That's just not done. So we're trying to teach them to interrupt. And so we would have them yell out every time they heard an idiom used, they would yell idiom. And if they did it, they get a prize, a token. And then we would stop and document the idiom and then define it and then talk about it a little bit and
Excellent.
then go back. And it was such a great way to get them to like interrupt you. And then at the end, they got books and prizes and stuff. It was such a great idea. That was my coworker who came up with that idea. And we did it in a room full of like 40 adult learners, and it was very effective.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's some of the same things I learned when I went to Japan. They are very polite people. We were actually taught to not look at something in the store for too long because your translators or your family that you stay with or whatever would buy it for you. So you had to be careful.
Right.
Um, and
Don't want it.
right. Yeah, just looking. And on the idioms, I talked to someone she was from the Middle East, and she said one of the most interesting idioms she heard was she was at her mother-in-law's, and they were making like pigs in blankets, little hot dogs wrapped in croissant, and the mother-in-law said, "Let's pop these puppies in the oven." And she just had to stop and think, what? Puppies in the oven? So yeah, idiom.
Yes. Yeah. And there's so much of that. We don't even realize how much we use that. And I'm sensitive to it.
Yeah, so that's really a fantastic thing to learn. And right, teaching the AI those idioms, every now and then I'm chatting with an AI and I feel like I need to explain something more than I do, and the chat box comes back with more slang than I realized it understood, acronyms and everything that I was spelling out for it, even though it apparently knew
It
that.
knows.
I mean, if you realize you go to Google to ask what this acronym means or what this phrase means, and it tells you, it pulls an answer. Well, our AI is pulling up those same answers to respond.
Yeah.
They're just doing it at light speed. My goodness.
And in context.
Right, and in context, it's amazing. It's amazing what literature can teach in itself.
Totally.
But that's not always apparent if you just have a degree in literature, right? So doing the teaching, doing the event management. Um, you mentioned you travel abroad. Tell us a little more about
Yeah.
that.
Well, in those days, in the early 90s, mid 90s, when computer software adoption was on fire, the company I worked for was doing lots and lots of training for the big companies around here. So we were on the road a lot doing localized training for sales offices around the country. And that led to doing training internationally as well. And so, there were years that I was on the road the whole time. It was really exhausting. So at one point, I took a job living abroad. I lived in London for just over a year. My husband came with me. We both worked there for a year. We had an apartment in Kentish Town, and I was teaching a train the trainer class, very much like the one I had been teaching, and it was for people who wanted to earn certification for Microsoft Certified Trainer or CompTIA Certified Trainer, which were requirements. And so I got to go there and interact with people. And again, I'm dealing with it wasn't just British people, it was all kinds of people. And London is as much a melting pot as New York City is, or, LA. So there's just all kinds of people there. And one of the things I felt like I was able to do is encourage them to step from behind the podium and stop lecturing. Instead of like tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them again what you told them. Like, let's use some smarter adult learning strategies here to kind of let's get them to tell you what they learned instead of you telling them what they learned. So that feedback loop development became like a really core part of the train the trainer program I was doing, which is not what anyone was doing. No one was encouraging people to do that. So I ended up doing a lot of training around Europe, and I spoke at Microsoft conferences, and a client group of people, Heidi and David, that you know from the Learning Guild, they were doing conferences in Europe at that time. And so I was part of their conference in Barcelona. And then I was a track coach for a conference they did in southern France, actually in Monaco. And they're like, oh, people in Europe, can't you get some of them to come to our conference and speak for an hour for free? I'm like, oh, here we go again. Now I got to like, how many people can I get to do that in this part of the world? But that is what we did. And so it's like everywhere I went, I kept coming back to these same core competencies, and I was able to leverage them in amazing ways. I mean, it was just so great to have those experiences.
And just out of curiosity, what was it that you used that you found got people to come and speak for free?
Usually it was related to ability to attend the conference for free and to learn from other leaders in the space and to schmooze, right? You're going to do a lot of exchanging of business cards, and there was like a little expo, so we're meeting vendors and buying software and talking about preferences. So that's like a brain trust. And in those days, those things were more rare than they are now, and they certainly weren't online. So we had to go there to do it that way because we didn't have another way to do it yet.
Right, right. That was an interesting time that I think
Yeah, that was an interesting time.
yeah, I remember when virtual presenting came out, and it was just so funny to me that this company creating this virtual like platform demonstrated a virtual meeting space by setting up a room just like it would be in a conference room where people come and sit on the chairs and listen to someone on a stage. And I actually thought that was so hilarious, right? I mean, if you have a virtual world, there's so much more that you could do with that, like take people on a safari
Mm.
or show them how to work on a car, right? Like it's three-dimensional and people can walk around and look at things. But uh another story for another day. I just
That's more Second Life, right? That's more like a virtual world where if I'm teaching somebody how to do dental surgery, let's do it in the virtual world first before we get into a clinic, because that's incredibly expensive. But what's hilarious is going in and sitting in virtual chairs, facing a virtual lectern with a virtual trainer standing there at a whiteboard, telling them what
exact
you're going to tell them, and then telling them what you told them. Yeah.
yes,
So
yes,
yeah, it
exactly.
was a different. when we finally got to virtual classroom, it was still sort of Stone Age looking. There were very
Yes.
limited things that we could do, but it was a connection. It was the stuff we had kind of been waiting for. Those of us who were traveling around the world to do training are like, oh, can't we mail ourselves? Can't we email ourselves to
Mhm.
these places?
Right. I for one did enjoy the travel, getting away from the house, and I lived in the woods, which was absolutely beautiful, but when you live there, you want to get out and you want to hit pavement for
Yeah,
once in a while.
yeah,
So,
agreed.
but yes, later when my kids needed me more to be at home, it was difficult. And we eventually got there. In fact, we're doing this online right now instead of in
Exactly.
person. So, and it's just such the norm. All right,
Yeah.
so you start doing event management. You're traveling the
Mhm.
world and learning a lot.
Mhm.
What came next?
Burnout, crash.
Oh boy.
I was exhausted. I had been living in a city and I felt like I always had to like scrape my skin at the end of the day because it was just like thick with pollution and my feet were wet for a year and I moved to the woods. My husband and I bought a big old farmhouse on a hilltop and had internet via satellite like animals.
Oh boy.
It was good for email, and we're talking like the turn of the century. It was good for email. It was not good for like we didn't have streaming functionality at that point.
Mm.
But I was still doing event production at a distance, and I was still doing train the trainer classes. So I was able to cobble together enough gig work. I might have also nannied a little bit in there. So every once in a while, I'll fill in with something like that. But I was really just a gig worker at that point until one of my clients from New York and London said, our trainers are so tired of going to China to do training. We've got this software platform. It's called Placeware. Can you put together a train the trainer course for us in this Placeware software tool? And that was a precursor to Microsoft Live Meeting. And if you remember it, it was one where if you wanted to talk to other people in your row, you had to physically move the little dot that represented your what we would now call avatar, which would just be like a colored rectangle. You had to move it to the row so that you could chat with those people. It was like so limited in its ability. But we used it. We made it work. We developed a train the trainer. I actually delivered it in New York to people who were in New York. Kind of like what you were describing before. You're kind of faking out the experience that they're going to have in real time, but they were able to then adapt to presenting content online and not getting on a plane every other week. So that was 1999. That was right at the time where people were getting real internet access. The infrastructure was developing. People's computers had enough memory to handle that kind of stuff. We still couldn't very easily do webcam sharing just because that would choke any audio or screen sharing you might have.
Yes.
But we were just coping with what that looked like at that time.
Right. So you had to come up with some tactics, I guess,
Yeah,
for being able to train in that kind of environment. It's
mhm,
very different than in person. Um,
it is.
but but yeah, I mean, traveling to the other side of the world, it's so expensive because you can't just like land and go straight to work.
Yeah.
There's an adjustment period for the anyone that does, bless their heart, that is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, but you're right. Some people, you were saying you liked it at a certain time in your life for a certain purpose. But
Hmm.
when you've been doing it for years upon years, it
Hmm.
is expensive and it is tedious and it has you missing out on other things. And it was really what I was wishing for. I thought, I wish I could just do my job from anywhere. I wish I didn't need to go someplace. But in 2004, the Guild, the company that you and I met working through, they
Hmm.
were doing events in Boston and in San Jose and in places like that in Orlando. And so I would go along to do conference production and I would speak about training methods. And then I started speaking about teaching content in a virtual methodology. And I was using, like, instead of doing polling like we would do in a virtual classroom, I was doing colored index cards with letters on them to make people get used to instructional design around sort of a back channel communication style. So I can't have each of you turn on your microphones and verbally say A, B, A. I need you to use a tool that's going to replicate this, because this it works better in a virtual environment if you use polling instead of have people verbally respond. So I'm like trying to shift people's thinking about how to even design training at all. How do you even think about how to engage learners? And I think we still struggle with that today, because people say, I get in there, I do my thing, nothing happens, I get no responses, and then we log off and we post the recording, and everybody wonders, why did we bother to do anything live? Why didn't we just record it and post the recording? And I'm not sure why, but the design is what matters. And so that became sort of my mission, my
Right.
focus for the next many years.
Right. That's that part of the training that you were teaching early on when it was in person to some of those adult learning theories of like pulling out the learning from them rather than telling them. Um, Much harder to
Exactly.
do in a virtual world. And you're right. Like, why not just record it and put it up there? But it always does improve the learning experience if people have a chance to kind of like we're doing. We're bringing that learning out and having this back and forth.
Mhm.
It's just not the same watching a video, right? Um,
It's not very compelling. It's too easy to let your mind wander.
mhm.
But good design engages the learner so that they can't be distracted. And the best compliment, the best learning experience, I think, are when people say, "Oh, time flew." It's
Yeah,
also helpful. Oh, go
it,
ahead.
it really is. Exactly. I love that compliment more than anything.
Yeah, yeah.
I love to be in a class where I can say that to someone. Like, it's already over. Wait,
Mm.
I was having fun.
I was immersed.
I was immersed, yes. All right. Well, is there anything else that you felt that you learned that you wish you could have captured that was beyond college? Anything that would have helped you to be able to say, I have learned this. I mean, obviously you worked with people that witnessed everything that you could do and asked you to do more of that. Like, what about this and that? But if you had to go out there and prove to someone that you learned these things, um, what would some of those things be that just aren't captured in your transcripts?
Yeah, I'm sure there's nothing that says my vast skill in project management and my obsessive attention to detail when it comes to managing that project. And that, I would think, for an employer would be like solid gold, right? I want a person who can handle that project and is going to agonize to make sure every detail of that project is dealt with. And recently, I think I told you about this. I had an article published that's essentially related to how obsessive I can be about having a plan B on a live online event. And the first line of the article is, I'm paranoid. And it's like, I'm going to go to extreme moves to set something up to be sure that when the technology fails in the live session, our plan B strategy is not just on our checklist, it's actually ready to go. Because otherwise, it's just a good idea. It's not actually a plan. So I will agonize over those things. And I think that is a real strength for me. And I think that's something that the people who do work with me are feel good about, because they're like, I know she'll lose sleep about it, so I won't have to. But I've got all my techniques to keep myself from losing sleep.
Right, because that's in fact one thing that you learned, like you had a burnout, and
Yeah.
so from that you had to put together techniques that would
Yeah.
keep you from burning out, or um, I don't know, would we really be here today?
Yeah. I mean, just getting in too deep that you sort of become ungrounded with the whole rest of your existence.
Exactly. Well, I want to thank you for
Thank you.
joining us today. I have at the end of every session, I kind of do like a quick fire set of questions
Okay.
that just kind of give us a little insight and a little more insight into who you are and what you like to learn. So, what was your favorite thing to learn?
I love learning about other cultures. I love learning about language and anything that someone will teach me about their culture, I will sit and listen to.
I think you and my daughter would get along swimmingly. She's just the same thing. And I can agree. I see that. What about the hardest thing? What's been the hardest thing for you to learn?
I struggle, especially when I'm working as a gig worker, to really do good financial planning and money management. Because when you're gig working and you have X number of dollars coming in one month and 20% of that coming in next month, you sometimes have to do some pretty clever MacGyvering of your financials. So that was actually something I learned in college too, like how to pay bills when you don't have any money. So I
Teach
am.
me that.
I have, again, like the techniques with the project management and the not losing sleep the night before a live event. I just try to be really, really conservative, and I often go to the worst case scenario and then plan backwards from there. Like if this is what's going to happen, I want to have that set aside so that I have that time wise, money wise, project resources wise.
Right. And that can be a really hard thing to learn. Just to get enough sleep the night before.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
we do the best we can. So if you could do it all differently, I don't know, it sounds like you had quite an adventure. Would there be anything you'd change?
Yeah, I I very much appreciate the path that I've taken, and I might just say I wish I had grown up a little sooner. I wish I had gotten smart about what I really wanted to be doing and kind of get in the zone a little quicker because in the moment I felt like there was a lot of gaps of agony in between, moments of success. And my mother used to joke, she's like, "Oh, look at you, you're an overnight success. 10 years of hard work and then overnight you're a success." So I those gaps were difficult, and the self-doubt and the what did I do with my education, and do I need to get a different education? Do I need to be doing something else in order to position myself for a job that I do not know will exist in 5 years? It's like it was very hard to be um, not clear on how this was all going to unfold. But I had to trust the opportunities as they presented themselves, and even when sometimes people tried to talk me out of things, I went with the things that I thought I wanted to do with my time. Like, I will enjoy that experience, even if I don't get paid. I'm going to do it because I want to do that thing with my time. And I think very often people will say, well, how is that going to, what are you going to do? As long as you're not wasting a ton of money, I think taking a job or taking an opportunity or taking a trip or going on a job interview, just see what happens. You don't, it doesn't have to change everything, but maybe it does. But if you don't take it, who knows? You maybe missed a really great opportunity. And I think about my first job was in the writing center, that little card that was on the bulletin board that said Berlitz Language Schools is hiring English teachers. And that little card was like my invitation to the next phase of my life, which was fantastic.
That's awesome. I mean, what is it they say? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
That's it.
And you really got a lot out of that, in particular, learning about cultures and
Yeah.
learning that you love learning about culture and language and
Yes.
those things. So, yeah, take the opportunity.
Yeah.
All right. So, what's one thing college can't teach? I mean, I think this whole conversation has been a
Mm.
little bit about all those things that college can't teach. What would you say if you could say one thing that
Mm.
is?
College doesn't teach you, I'm not sure it can't teach you, but it doesn't teach you who to be. It it teaches you to experience a lot of different things, and it's up to you to toss out the things that you don't want to do. Like, I don't want to live in a place with fluorescent lighting. So I learned that. And if that's what it is, it's okay. You could just start checking things off your list and say, that's not for me. I tried it. I took that course. I learned that thing, but now I don't want to do that thing anymore. I lived there. I liked it, but I don't want to do it anymore. It's okay for you to not know and just to start checking things off your list. So that would be
Yeah, I think
what I,
Steve Jobs would echo that in his big speech that he gave about taking the classes that he wanted to, not the ones that he had to, right? And
yeah.
that I think one of his famous things was it led him on how to develop fonts in Apple, right?
Mhm.
Because he went a different direction than what they told him to go. Okay, last thing, what's something you want more people to know about you?
Hmm. I want to tell you that I have used vision boards to help me focus my personal goals into something that I think helps me stay focused when the opportunities come. So if that's something that you're curious about, I would encourage you to read more about it and try it. You might look at me and say, wow, that's a little bit woo-woo, but I even things that are woo-woo sometimes have a really good effect or impact on the person who maybe just isn't clear about things. Like, I don't know what's right, but I'm going to spend a minute and just internally think about what's right for me and then see what happens from there. Personally, I think it helps me say no to the things that aren't right for me.
Well, you've piqued my curiosity, and by the way, idiom, woo woo.
Exactly. Good job.
Thank you.
You get a wooden nickel. That was the token. We
A
got
wooden
wooden nickels
nickel.
as our see, even that's an idiom.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again, Karen Hyder, for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your story. We look forward to, learning more from the things that you've taught us today and carrying that with us forward. Um, and I'm going to be looking into vision boards. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
All right. And that's it.
Thank you. That was so fun.